The diner was alive with the soft hum of clinking plates, the hiss of a coffee machine, and the occasional burst of laughter from families enjoying their meals. Neon lights buzzed faintly in the window, casting a dull glow onto the cracked vinyl booths. Waitresses in faded uniforms darted between tables, balancing trays of pancakes, bacon, and steaming mugs of coffee. It was a place meant for comfort, a place where families came together for breakfast on Saturday mornings, where birthdays were sometimes celebrated with candles stuck in stacks of waffles. But in the farthest corner of the room, tucked away in a booth that looked just a bit too big for her small frame, sat a girl who didn't belong to the cheerful chaos around her. She was no older than 9. Her sweater was worn at the elbows, and her sneakers, though still intact, showed the scuffs of long use. Her dark hair fell across her face as she leaned forward over the table, where a single slice of pie sat waiting for her. No birthday candles, no balloons, no card signed with messy crayon drawings. Just pie, and a crumpled $3 bill carefully placed beside it, as though she were making sure the world knew she wasn't asking for more than she could pay. The waitress had noticed her when she first came in, clutching those 3 bills tightly in her little hand. She had ordered quietly, almost apologetically, as though she feared even asking for that one slice of pie might be too much. The waitress, moved by the sight, had slipped a bright red cherry onto the whipped cream and whispered, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." The girl had smiled back, but it was the kind of smile children use when they've been taught to be polite, not when they are truly happy. Now she sat in silence, her legs dangling off the booth, not quite long enough to touch the floor. She pressed her palms together for a moment, bowing her head slightly. If you were close enough, you might have heard her whisper something soft, perhaps a wish, perhaps a prayer. Her fork hovered over the pie. She poked at it, breaking the crust gently, as if she didn't want to eat too much too quickly. Every now and then, she glanced at the door, her eyes searching, hopeful, waiting for someone, anyone, to walk through and say, "Happy birthday." I remembered, but the door only opened for strangers. And across the diner, at another booth, a man was watching. He was in his 30s, shoulders broad from years of hard work, hands rough with calluses. His jacket was faded, his boots scuffed, but his presence was steady. Beside him sat his daughter, a girl about the same age as the one in the corner. Unlike the solitary child, this girl's hair was tied in playful braids, her cheeks flushed from laughter, her plate piled with pancakes. She was chattering about school, about her teacher, about the new book she was reading. But midway through a sentence, she stopped. Her gaze had wandered to the corner booth, where the other little girl sat alone. Her brow furrowed, her lips pressed together. She tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice urgent but soft. "Look." The man turned his head. At first, he thought his daughter had spotted something unimportant, a balloon, maybe, or a cartoon on the diner's TV. But when his eyes landed on the corner booth, his breath caught. He saw her, the girl with the lonely pie, the crumpled dollars, the small hands folded neatly on the table. She looked so small in that booth, so lost in the crowd of families and couples. For a moment, the man simply stared. Something inside his chest tightened, a feeling he couldn't quite name. He knew what birthdays should look like: messy, loud, filled with too much sugar and laughter that echoed into the night. But this was the opposite. This was a child marking her own birthday with silence. His daughter tugged again at his sleeve. Why is she alone? On her birthday? The man swallowed hard. He didn't have an answer, but the question rang in his ears, louder than the clatter of dishes, louder than the chatter of the diner. The little girl in the corner finally took a small bite of her pie. She chewed slowly, carefully, as though making it last. She set the fork down, folded her hands again, and stared at the table. The father across the diner felt his own daughter's eyes on him. She wasn't saying anything now, but her expression spoke clearly enough. Do something. And maybe you, watching this unfold, would feel the same. Think about it. Imagine sitting in that diner yourself. Imagine noticing a child on her birthday, sitting alone with nothing but 3 crumpled dollars and a slice of pie. White right pointing backhand index, what would you do? Would you look away? Pretend you hadn't seen it? Or would you get up, cross the room, and make sure she didn't spend her birthday in silence? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know, what would you do if you were there? Because in that diner, at that moment, one man was about to make his choice. The girl across the room had no idea that her life was about to change. She had no idea that the man watching her, the single dad sitting with his own daughter, was about to stand up. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same again. The diner was noisy enough that most people didn't notice her. Waitresses weaved between tables, carrying trays stacked high with pancakes and omelets, the jukebox in the corner playing an old country song. But for Michael, the single dad in the back booth, everything else seemed to fade into silence. He couldn't stop staring at the little girl. Her birthday slice of pie was barely touched. She pushed the fork around the plate as though trying to make the slice look bigger, stretching the moment, making it last. Every so often, she glanced toward the door again, hope flickering in her eyes, only to dim each time a stranger walked in. Michael's chest ached at the sight. He knew that feeling. He knew what it was like to wait for someone who wasn't coming. "Daddy," his daughter whispered again. Her braids bounced as she leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "We can't just let her sit there. It's her birthday." Michael shifted in his seat. He had worked long hours all week, barely scraping together enough to treat his daughter to this breakfast. Money was tight, always tight. A single parent's wallet never stretched as far as it needed to. He thought of the overdue bills sitting on his kitchen counter, the ones waiting for him at home like storm clouds. But when he looked back at the corner booth, saw that girl trying so hard not to look lonely, all his excuses felt hollow. He cleared his throat. "Maybe her parents are coming," he muttered, half to himself. His daughter frowned. "No, Daddy. If they were coming, she wouldn't look so sad." Out of the mouths of children come truths adults are too afraid to say. Michael rubbed a hand over his jaw. He could stay seated, pretend it wasn't his problem. But deep down, he knew he'd regret it. Some moments in life were bigger than money, bigger than fear. And this was one of them. He slid out of the booth. His daughter's face lit up immediately, a smile of approval spreading across her cheeks. "Go, Daddy," she whispered. Michael adjusted his jacket and took a steadying breath. The walk from his booth to Hayes felt longer than it should have. Every step seemed to echo, his boots pressing against the tiled floor. He passed families laughing over syrupy pancakes, couples clinking coffee mugs together, a teenager scrolling on his phone. No one else was paying attention to the girl in the corner. But Michael saw her. When he finally reached her booth, he paused. Up close, she seemed even smaller. The pie sat in front of her, the cherry already slipping from the whipped cream. The $3 bills were still neatly folded, as though she was guarding them with all her might. Michael cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there," he said softly. "Mind if I sit for a second?" The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, eyes that had seen too much loneliness for someone her age. She hesitated, glancing toward the empty seat across from her. I guess so," she whispered. Michael slid into the booth, his large frame filling the space opposite her. Up close, he could see the faint bruise on her wrist, the way her sweater was fraying at the cuffs. His heart twisted. "Happy birthday," he said gently. Her lips parted in surprise. "How did you know?" He smiled faintly. "The pie gave it away. Not too many kids order pie for breakfast unless they've got a reason." She looked down at the plate, cheeks flushing. "I didn't have enough for cake," she murmured. Michael swallowed hard. He wanted to reach across the table, to tell her she didn't need to explain. But instead, he nodded. "Pie works just fine. Some of the best birthdays are the simple ones." The girl tilted her head. "Do you think so?" "Yeah," he said firmly. "It's not about how much you spend. It's about who's with you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. And maybe you, watching this right now, feel the weight of them too. Because we've all had birthdays that were lonely. We've all had moments where what mattered most wasn't the gift or the cake, but the people who remembered us. White right pointing backhand index, tell me in the comments. What's the simplest birthday you ever had? The one you'll never forget. Was it about the presents? Or was it about the people? Back in the diner, The girl pushed the pie toward him shyly. Do you want some? Michael shook his head, touched by the gesture. No, sweetheart. That's yours. You deserve every bite. For the first time that morning, a real smile flickered across her face. Small, hesitant, but real. Just then, Michael's own daughter appeared at the booth, sliding in beside the lonely girl as though she'd been invited. Hi, she chirped, cheerful and unafraid. My name's Sophie. How old are you today? The girl blinked, startled by the sudden intrusion, but then whispered, 9. Sophie gasped. Me too. Well, almost. My birthday's next month. The two girls looked at each other, and something shifted. The loneliness that had clung to the birthday girl's shoulders seemed to lift just a little. She wasn't invisible anymore. Someone had noticed her. Someone her own age was talking to her, smiling at her. Michael leaned back in the booth, watching the two girls exchange shy smiles and quiet giggles. His decision to stand up had already changed something. The heaviness in the girl's eyes was softening. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that this small act of kindness was about to ripple outward in ways none of them could have imagined. This wasn't just going to be about a slice of pie. This was the beginning of something far bigger. The diner was not a grand place. Its floors creaked, and the neon sign outside buzzed like an old radio losing signal. But in that moment, it might as well have been the stage for a story none of the people inside would ever forget. The little girl sat at the table with her paper plate and 3 $1 bills folded neatly beside her. Her cupcake, already half collapsed from the tiny candle she had stuck in herself, looked like it might fall apart if she so much as breathed on it. And then, he stood. The man who had been sitting just one table away, the one she hadn't dared to look at more than twice, pushed back his chair. The sound of the legs scraping the tiled floor made her heart jump. She froze, afraid she'd done something wrong, afraid she was about to be scolded for taking up space she hadn't paid for. But the man didn't look angry. He looked determined. He wasn't dressed like the other customers, the ones who still carried the faint scent of cologne and leather wallets. His shirt was worn, the sleeves rolled up because the fabric was frayed at the edges. His hair was slightly unkempt, and there was a tiredness around his eyes, the kind of tiredness only single parents know. He looked at her, then at the crumpled bills on the table, and then back at her again. And he smiled. Not the pitying smile adults often gave when they saw something that made them uncomfortable. No, his smile was soft, steady, and kind. Hey, he said quietly, as though he didn't want to embarrass her. Is it your birthday? Her lips trembled. She nodded, eyes wide, clutching her cupcake as though it might run away. The man's heart ached. He saw his own daughter in her face, the way kids just want one day, one single day, to feel like the world remembered them. And here she was, trying to make it happen with $3 and a cupcake. He glanced at the waitress, who stood awkwardly behind the counter, unsure if she should intervene. Then he made his choice. Raising his voice just enough for the room to hear, he called out, "Excuse me, could we get a real birthday cake over here?" The diner went quiet for a beat. Folks paused midair. Conversations dipped. And then the room shifted. Heads turned toward the little girl, who now sat frozen, her eyes wide as if she couldn't believe she was part of this sudden spectacle. The waitress blinked, caught off guard, then gave a nervous smile. "A birthday cake?" "Yes," the man said with a calm confidence. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a card, and placed it on the counter. "Whatever you've got. Doesn't matter if it's fancy or not. Just something that makes her feel celebrated today." The girl's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. She wanted to tell him not to, that she didn't deserve it, that it was too much. But the words never made it out of her mouth. And then, it happened. The cook, who had been leaning against the kitchen door, disappeared back into the kitchen. The waitress nodded, a spark of excitement flickering in her eyes now. She rushed to grab candles, plates, and whatever they could find. Within minutes, the diner transformed. A small chocolate cake appeared, slightly lopsided but beautiful in the way only last-minute miracles can be. Someone dimmed the overhead lights, and a stranger at another booth pulled out their phone flashlight to shine like a spotlight. And then, Without planning it, the entire diner began to sing, "Happy birthday to you." The girl's tiny hands flew to her face, her shoulders shaking as tears spilled over. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't forgotten. She was the center of something good. The man placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her, letting her know she wasn't alone. When the song ended, he leaned down and whispered, "Go on, make a wish." Her candle flickered, the flame bending as if listening closely. She closed her eyes tight, and for a moment, just a moment, the world around had disappeared. She wished not for toys, not for riches, but for one thing only, that she might never feel this alone again. She blew out the candle. The diner erupted in cheers. The man clapped the loudest. His voice carried warmth, pride, and something else, a silent promise that maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be the last time she had someone to stand up for her. If you had been sitting in that diner, watching this unfold, what would you have done? Would you have sung with the crowd, or maybe even added something special for her? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the smallest gestures change the biggest moments. The last wisps of smoke from the candle curled upward, vanishing into the warm air of the diner. The girl stared at the little cake in front of her, eyes red from crying, cheeks damp with tears. But now those tears were mixed with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She hesitated, almost afraid to touch the cake, as though it wasn't really hers. As though if she reached out, it might vanish like a dream. The man noticed her trembling fingers. With a gentle nudge of the plate, he whispered, "Go on, it's all yours." The room slowly returned to its usual hum. But here at this small corner table, something had shifted. The waitress placed an extra fork beside her plate, then gave the man a knowing smile before retreating. The girl picked up the fork with both hands. It was too big for her grip, and carved a tiny piece from the edge of the cake. She chewed slowly, her wide eyes darting up toward the man as if to ask, "Is it really okay?" He chuckled softly. "You don't have to ask permission, you know. Birthdays are meant for eating cake until your stomach tells you to stop." She giggled, a sound so small it could have been missed. But the man caught it, and it did something to him. It broke down a wall inside his chest he didn't even realize he'd built. As she ate, he leaned back in his chair. He thought of his own daughter, how many birthdays he had struggled to make special for her. He remembered working extra shift just to afford a cake with her favorite cartoon character on it. He remembered wrapping presents in old newspaper when he couldn't afford colorful wrapping paper. But he also remembered her smile. That was what made every sacrifice worth it. Looking at this girl now, sitting alone with $3 crumpled and a cupcake she had bought for herself, he wondered, where is her family? Who let her sit here by herself on her birthday? Finally, he asked, softly, so as not to scare her, "Do you come here a lot?" She shrugged, poking her fork into the frosting. "Sometimes, when I save up enough." "Save up?" His brow furrowed. "I do little jobs. I help people carry bags or sweep up outside stores. They give me coins. I keep them in a jar. Today, I broke it open." She looked at him, her voice fragile. "I wanted to buy something special." The man's throat tightened. He wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but he bit them back. Pushing too fast could make her retreat. So instead, he nodded. "That was smart. You made today count. That takes courage." Her eyes flickered, as though nobody had ever called her courageous before. Minutes passed. She ate in silence, but every so often, she glanced at him. And each time, he gave her the same steady smile, the kind that said, "I see you. You matter." Finally, she spoke again. "Do you have kids?" The question caught him off guard, but he answered honestly, "Yes, a daughter. She's about your age." Her face lit up, as though this piece of information tied them together in a secret way. "Does she like cake too?" He laughed, a deep, warm sound. "She loves it, but mostly the frosting. She'd probably fight you for that part." The girl smiled so brightly it nearly broke him. For a moment, he wasn't in a diner anymore. He was at a birthday party, balloons on the walls, his daughter tugging at his hand, laughter filling the air. And then the moment passed. And he was back, watching someone else's child trying to make sense of kindness she didn't expect. The cake was almost gone when she finally whispered, "Thank you." He tilted his head. For what? For standing up. For making everyone sing. For the cake. She paused, her voice cracking. "Nobody's ever done that for me before." His chest ached. He wanted to reach across the table, to tell her she deserved so much more, to promise her she'd never have to feel forgotten again. But he stopped himself. Promises were heavy things, and he didn't know her story yet. Instead, he said, "Sometimes, it just takes one person to remind us we're worth celebrating, even if it's a stranger." Her eyes shone, and for a moment, silence wrapped around them. Not the uncomfortable kind. This was the silence of understanding. The man paid the bill quietly, slipping an extra tip to the waitress for her part in the surprise. As he stood, he expected the girl to stay seated, to remain anchored to her little table and her last crumbs of cake. But then she looked up at him, hesitated, and asked the question he least expected. "Will you stay? Just a little longer?" The world seemed to pause. He looked down at her, at the fragile hope in her eyes, the way her small voice carried more weight than any grown adult's demand. She didn't want more cake, or gifts, or even songs. She wanted presence. Someone to sit beside her, so she wasn't invisible anymore. His instinct screamed yes, but his mind hesitated. What would people think? Was it right to blur the line between kindness and something deeper? Still, he saw the loneliness in her, and he remembered the way his own daughter once held his hand so tightly, as if letting go meant losing everything. He pulled his chair back out. "All right," he said gently, sitting down again. "I'll stay." Her smile bloomed like sunrise. The hum of the diner had returned, plates clattering, conversations weaving in and out like background music. Yet at that little table, time felt suspended. The man sat across from her, watching as she picked at the last crumbs of her cake with the edge of a fork, almost reluctant to let the moment end. He knew he couldn't sit here forever. He had responsibilities, work, bills, his daughter waiting at home. But something inside him wouldn't let him stand up and walk away. Not yet, because too many questions pressed against his chest. Questions he was afraid to ask, and answers he feared would break his heart. He cleared his throat gently. "So, who did you celebrate with last year?" Her fork paused. She looked down at the plate as though the answer might be written in the frosting. Then she shrugged. "I didn't. Last year, I just went to sleep early. Pretended it wasn't happening." The man's jaw tightened. He felt anger, not at her, but at the world, at the invisible forces that could let a child's birthday slip by like it was nothing. He forced a calm nod, though his heart ached. "Everybody deserves to be remembered on their birthday," he said softly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not everybody gets that." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "What about your family? Don't they?" He stopped himself before the words tumbled out too bluntly. He rephrased, "Doesn't anyone usually do something for you?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the window. The neon sign outside cast a dull glow on her face. For a long moment, she didn't answer, and then, in a whisper so small it almost got lost in the clatter of dishes, she said, "My mom works a lot. She's hardly home, and when she is, she's tired. She forgets things sometimes." Her voice cracked, though she tried to steady it. "Like birthdays." The man exhaled slowly. That explained some things, but not all. He could feel there was more, layers she wasn't saying. "What about your dad?" he asked gently. Her fork stilled. She shook her head. "I don't know him." Silence settled between them. Heavy, weighted. The man's thoughts spiraled. He knew what it meant for a child to grow up without one parent. He'd been carrying that weight for years, raising his own daughter alone after her mother left. He remembered the nights of juggling 2 jobs, the mornings of packing lunches, the afternoons when he forced a smile despite exhaustion. But his daughter never had to sit alone in a diner with 3 crumpled dollars for her birthday. This girl's loneliness cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He wanted to say something, anything to ease her pain. But what words could possibly bridge that kind of emptiness? So instead, he asked, What's your name? She blinked, surprised he hadn't asked sooner. Lila, she whispered. He smiled. That's beautiful. My daughter's name is Grace. Lila's face softened at that. Grace, like the song. He chuckled. Exactly like the song. For a few minutes, the heaviness lifted. She asked about Grace, what she liked, what her favorite food was, if she had a favorite color. He answered every question, describing Grace's messy curls, her love of spaghetti, the way she insisted on painting everything purple. And as he spoke, he realized something startling. Lila was leaning forward, soaking up every detail like a child desperate for stories she'd never heard before. Not just about Grace, but about what family could look like. It hit him then. This wasn't just about cake. This was about belonging. About seeing a picture of what she secretly longed for but didn't dare ask for. Eventually, she asked, "Do you think people can ever have two birthdays?" He tilted his head. Two. She nodded, her small fingers tracing circles on the tabletop. One for the day they are born, and one for the day someone finally notices them. The words stabbed through him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. How do you respond to something like that? He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. If that's true, then maybe today's your second birthday. Lila's lips parted, her eyes widening as if she'd never considered that possibility. And for the first time, she let herself smile fully. No hesitation, no guard. But even as the warmth grew between them, the man knew reality was creeping closer. He couldn't just sit here and pretend forever. He had to leave at some point. And yet, how could he? How could he walk away from this fragile little girl who had just admitted the world had overlooked her for years? He rubbed a hand over his face, wrestling with the weight of the decision building inside him. He glanced at the clock on the wall. His daughter would be waiting. Dinner would need to be made. Homework supervised. Life went on, but so did Lila's loneliness. And now that he'd seen it, could he really just go? He leaned forward one last time. Lila, do you ever get scared? Being here alone? Her answer came without hesitation. All the time. And in that moment, he knew walking away wasn't an option anymore. The check landed quietly on the table. Without hesitation, the single dad reached over and covered it, paying for her part before she could even protest. Lila looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes, as if she wanted to say, "Why would you do this for me?" But the words never left her lips. When they stepped out of the diner, the night air was cold, carrying the faint smell of rain. He glanced at her worn shoes, the frayed laces, the way she pulled her thin sweater tighter around her shoulders. It was the kind of detail that spoke louder than anything she could have told him. "Can I walk you home?" he asked gently. At first, she shook her head, but after a pause, she whispered, "Okay." The walk was quiet. Streetlights flickered above them, casting long shadows as a silence filled the air. He didn't push her with questions. He simply walked beside her, protective, present. When they finally reached her apartment building, his heart sank. The place was crumbling, the stairwell dark, windows broken and patched with cardboard. A faded party hat clung to the railing upstairs, fluttering weakly in the breeze like a cruel reminder. "Do you live here?" he asked softly. Lila's voice cracked as she nodded. "My mom works 2 jobs. She tries, but she's barely ever home. I just wanted tonight to feel special." Tears slid down her cheeks, raw and honest. But it was just me and $3. The single dad felt something inside him shatter. He thought of his own daughter, safe at home, loved, never questioning if she mattered. And then he looked at Lila, who had sat alone on her birthday, just waiting for someone to care. He knelt slightly, meeting her eyes. "Listen to me, Lila. Tonight doesn't end like this. Not for you. Birthdays are meant to remind us we're not alone. And I promise you, you will never feel forgotten again. Not while I'm around." For the first time that night, she smiled through her tears. A small, fragile smile, but real. It was enough to light up the darkness around them. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this encounter wasn't an accident. Maybe it was meant to happen, that he was meant to sit at the table next to Hayes, meant to stand up when no one else did. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness doesn't just change someone else's life. It changes yours too. And as for Lila, that night, she didn't go to bed feeling forgotten. She went to bed feeling seen. What would you have done if you were in the single dad's place? Walked away or stepped in? Let us know in the comments below.